This program is produced by Eagle Mountain Apostolic Resource Center. To find additional episodes of this program, as well as other content, visit eaglemountain.tv.
We are on chapter 5 in the book of John. We're studying John, and it's a good study. The book is wonderful. At any rate, I wrote a book on John. This is the book I wrote on John. And I'm teaching slowly from it as it comes. And again, I'm not trying to change any doctrine or anything that the scriptures say. I'm only explaining what English has done to the words. The Greek word is probably fine. You just have to look it up and figure out what it says, because it often the English translation of that many years ago, 1600s, is different than it would be translated today, which leaves us it meaning something else. So let me start. I'm starting at the head of chapter 5. Verse 1 is, "After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem." After this means after the pool, after the pool of Bethesda, I'm going into that one. This is after the Samaritan woman basically gets saved, and her whole town gets saved from Christ. Her giving him water at the well. You know the story. Verse 2, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed people. Some manuscripts insert wholly or in part this statement, some manuscripts, not all, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred the water. Whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was healed of whatever disease he had." Verse 5, "And one man was there that had been an invalid for 38 years. Verse 6, "When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to be healed?' Verse 7, "The sick man answered, 'Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And when I am going, another steps in. When I am going, another steps down before me.' Verse 8, "Jesus said to him, 'Get up, take up your mat, and walk.' Verse 9, "And at once the man was healed. And he took up his mat, he took up his bed," or his mat, it's both two words, "and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath." Now it's pretty cool. I like all that. Verse 10, "So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, 'It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to be taking up your bed.'" Verse 11, "But he answered them, he said, 'The man who healed me, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk.' Verse 12, they asked him, 'Who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk?' Verse 13, now the man who had been healed did not know who he was." Interesting. "For Jesus had withdrawn, so that was a crowd, because there was a crowd in that place." Verse 14, "Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, 'See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you.'" Verse 15, I think I need to go on because I need to explain this before we get caught in a bad spot. Verse 15, "The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him." Verse 16, "And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered him, verse 17, my Father is working until now, and I am working. Verse 18, this was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, men's law, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. There's so much in this. I need to just get onto it and tell you about it. It's fascinating, and obviously the whole book of John is great, everything about it. So I'll just read this again. Starting with verse 1, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Verse 2, now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, which is the sheep market, by the way, is a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which means the house of mercy, which has 5 roofed colonnades or porches. They're just 5 of those. You can, whenever. In verse 3, in these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. That's verse 3. Now, verse 4, a lot of manuscripts add this statement. John did not put this statement in there. He didn't put this statement in there. Now, I'll read the statement so that you can hear it, then I'll try to explain it. But waiting for the moving of the water. In other words, when they were blind and lame and paralyzed, they were waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel of the Lord went down in certain seasons, into the pool and stirred the water. Whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was healed of whatever disease he had. Basically, a miracle, so to speak. Now, the fact that John did not add this little part to the book, but it was by others, it was an attempt for others to explain why people were laying at the pool, lame and ready to go in the water. They had to have had some healings for anybody to be there at all. You don't just jump into a pool and say, okay, I'm healed, and it never happens. You can see what I'm saying. So, but the fact that they called it for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred the water. Do you think the writers or the translators, this is not, there's some manuscripts, this is certain translations of the scriptures, added this. The translators added this to the Bible. Do you understand what I mean? They added it to possibly explain why the people were waiting at the pool. Is it a presumption that an angel of the Lord stirred up the water? Is that a presumption? Do you understand what I mean? And why did Jesus? So Jesus shows up. Anyway, verse 4 has added these original manuscripts to explain why so many unwell people were gathered at this place. Being located right near Jerusalem, or right in Jerusalem, it wouldn't take long for the reputation of the pool of Bethesda to spread until people were saying, without verse 4, the scene would appear as just a place where superstition made people think they could be healed. You hear this? Verse 4 gives it credibility and confirms that there were supernatural miracles happening right in Jerusalem. Supernatural stuff was happening. However, John is the only disciple who wrote about this place, and he chose not to mention the healings that had been taking place there. So, John's the only guy of the Gospels that wrote about this. So it's the translators that decided, do you get what I'm saying, to add that little bit, and they call it verse 4. So they added just that little bit to the scriptures to try to maybe not make everybody look like they're crazy for laying beside the pool waiting to be healed when the water was stirred up. You catch what I'm doing? Is that making any sense, what I just said to you? Verse 5, one man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. That's a sizable amount of time. Verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made whole, is what the question he asked. We use the word healed. Do you want to be healed? English word. The word is to be made whole. To be made whole. I need to be made whole. I don't mean that I don't need to be healed, but I need to be made whole, because that's what healing is. I got this problem over here. I got this problem here. I got whatever. I want those to go away. No, I need to be made whole so that whatever brought this on or whatever it may be is gone. Do you understand that? Do you remember when we talked about Jesus healing the official's son at a distance? He just said, "Go home and your son will be fine," after the soldier had come to him, or the official had come to him. And so when he found out at the same hour that Jesus said that, his son's fever broke, because it was unto death. His fever broke and he began to recover. So Jesus didn't snap him back to perfect. He started, you understand this? He stopped the negative thing that was killing him or hurting him. He stopped that. And then the body did the miracle that it's made to do, and that's heal itself. And so we're missing the concept of the body is made to heal itself. And what happens with medicine sometimes, don't hear me negative, but what can happen with it is it's just messing with symptom and not going to what caused this to happen to begin with. And that's the only thing that Jesus could do, is cut that off. He could cut off the negative. Once that's cut off, then recovery begins. Now, to us, it seems like you weren't healed. But the truth of it is, when he cuts it off, what's making you sick is stopped. And now you begin to come back. That's the miracle of the body. I hope I made sense right there. Do you want to be made whole? The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool." He didn't say, "I want to be made whole." Isn't that interesting? He said, "Hey, all I can do is bellyache about not being able to get into the pool." And if you see this as superstition, I'm not trying to get funny here, but okay. "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me," and what? Sucks up all the cool stuff, all the cool bubbling water, and now there's not enough healing power left for me. You see what I'm trying to get at. How many of the so-called healings happening at the pool were actually healings, and how many were just something that wasn't really very wrong with you to begin with, but it had kept you into that place? I won't go into all those details because it's more than we can probably handle. Is medicine like superstition? Is it like a myth? Did you know, you ever see the medical symbol, the little staff and the serpent wrapped around it, and then there's two serpents wrapped around cross-like looking staff with wings on the top, stuff like that. There's a name for that, and I think it's an Asclepius. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But that's the name of the Greek god of healing. Did you know that? It's written in the book of Revelation. I've taught it when I was doing Revelation back at that time. When you look at the town of Pergamum, that's where that healing thing started, Satan's throne. That's where and then that created the worship of medicine. That is where that came from, as Asclepius, something. I think it's like that. I'll look it up sometime and then try to remember to tell you. You can see it anywhere. And the point of that is, it is meant to bring him, because the daughters of this guy, this Greek mythological guy, his daughters' names, one of them was named Panacea, meaning everybody gets healed with one pill, so to speak. One thing heals all. Another one is quick recovery. A daughter's names mean quick recovery. Another one is hygiene. One of their names was Hygiene. It's where we get the name Hygiene. It's one of the daughters of this mythological Greek god, as they called, who was the healing god. So I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on doctors who work hard to save lives and heal people, but is the root of what we're doing based in superstition? Is it based in Greek mythology? Do you see what I'm trying to get at? So, and that once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. That man's been lame for 38 years. Do you think he jumped up and ran off? Or do you think it was a little bit of funny looking walking for a while until he got himself together? Now, I've seen miracles before in healing times. And there was a man, in India whose just legs are all mangled up, and he's been riding around on a little tiny cart close to the ground. He pushed himself around. And he was at one of those meetings, and actually Mahesh Shavda, and prayed for him. And this guy gets up off that cart and he walks. It was some bad looking walking for a while. Do you see what I'm saying? Legs still bent awful, but he was moving, and then slowly, it was beginning to change. And it was beginning to turn. It's a process. Again, he stopped what was keeping him crippled until the body began to recover and repair itself. You see what I'm trying to get at? Not trying to make out to be somebody being the bad guy. But in this picture, this guy, now he's gone around, he's walked around, he's done something. He's probably looking a little better than his 38 years of being lamed like this. And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. We see the words "at once." That's a translation is not exactly correct. Now that day was the Sabbath. Be reminded, only a few were healed from that pool. Jesus, boom, popped that guy. Remember when scriptures that said, and everyone was healed that was there? All were healed that were there. Remember that? Is there something a little more special about what Jesus does than the Greek mythology guy? You see what I'm getting at? We need the Jesus. I want the Jesus one. This one over here. That the high one, the high, so on and so forth. John first chose not to mention this in the Bible, and actually being healed at the pool. Bible translated added this the 1500 years later. Jesus only healed one man and not the others. Why? Third was the healing done to offend the human traditions around the Sabbath? Or just to heal the man, or both? Why was this man, or could it have been anyone laying there in need at that time? He was made whole, being reminded he was made whole. He wasn't just not lame anymore. He was made whole, completely brought back. Another aspect to consider is that Jesus doesn't just heal the body so that you can go right back to where you were doing before you got sick to begin with. Jesus makes you whole. That's a really big deal. And that is everlasting wellness. That's what wholeness means, everlasting wellness. He didn't make you whole and then you just get sick again. He makes you whole for everlasting wellness. I'm good with that one. I like that. I like the everlasting wellness. One last thing to consider. Jesus didn't seem to pray for this man. He just told him, take up your mat. He just commanded him. Key word, commanded with true authority. That's such a key. So the verse 10, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed. I guess we're going to overlook the fact that you've been lame for 38 years. We're going to overlook that. I'm not going to find any joy in that. But one of the laws made by man has been broken. It wasn't made by God. We have supposed to keep the Sabbath holy. We made up a whole bunch of stuff to add to that scripture to make it look like we understand what you mean by that. Is that I hope I'm making sense when I'm saying all of that. The religious leaders chose to keep working at the appearance of fulfilling the law. That was the key. I made the law, and then I need to fulfill my own law, making me look pious. Do you understand what I'm saying? Believing that somehow salvation was the knowing of the law. This idea is giving the appearance of righteousness that still lives today. We like to appear righteous. Now, I don't want you to think I'm just a wretched old curmudgeon that couldn't possibly, be saved because I'm just too rotten. At the same time, I don't want you to think badly of me, but I also got to remember I'm made whole by the blood of the Lamb. It isn't something I did that got that happening. Jesus did that. Verse 11, but he answered them, the man who healed me was, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk. Did you think Jesus took authority over his life? Don't you think? I think he did. Verse 12, they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? Now the man who was healed did not know who he was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in that place. Why did Jesus not want to do this in a crowd? Miracles, we want the biggest possible crowd we can get. If we're going to try to pray for somebody and they get healed, we want the biggest crowd on the planet to see that. Why didn't Jesus? I understand the concept. He needed to stay hidden for X number of before. I mean, there's no telling how inundated he would be with people if they could figure it out that he was able to heal, although they did eventually get to that. But because Jesus said, I came to destroy the works of the devil. That's, of course, in 1 John 3. Is getting sick the works of the devil? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. In that sense, it's the works of the devil. Afterward, Jesus found, verse 14, him at the temple and said, see, you are well. You are made whole. Sin no more. Stop missing the mark of a relationship with God, that nothing worse may happen to you. That means this all sounds like God is sitting up in heaven and he's mad waiting for me to screw up so that he can make me sick or get me lame or hurt me in some way. Mean old God. Is that what we're really referring to here? The reality of where God is that when he has called you and he's wooing you and he's sent his son to make you whole, and it cost him a lot to do it. It cost him the price of his son. It cost the son hanging on a cross for your and my sake, and for the whole world that God made. God so loved the whole cosmos that he gave his only son. We know this, to save it, to bring it back to life. It's really the truth. I mean, just boom, give it life. Eternal life means, by the way, life-giving. You would live for, if God so loved the world, gave his only son, that whosoever put their trust in him, is the actual translation, would have permanent life-giving, is what that means. Permanent life-giving. Do you want life-giving? I want life-giving. I want me to be well, but I want to be life-giving. And that's called, we translated that, eternal life. It's probably a really good translation. It just doesn't, in English, it doesn't tell us what we need to hear. Life-giving means you are capable of giving life because it's in you. Christ in me. Christ in me, the life, the light. The life and the light are the same word, beginning of the book of John. I told it to you. So if that's the same word, then he's life-giving when you have eternal life. I hope it made sense for that. Don't, be sure, or worse will happen. The farther we go from that light, the worse things get. The more we pull against or struggle against the life or the light of Christ, the worse things get. Why? Because you're farther and farther away from life-giving. And you come into what the devil is doing, life-taking. He's stealing, killing, stealing, and destroying. That's what he does. Let's not do that. Let's cut that out. Let's knock that off. We don't have to fall down that trail all the time. All right. The greatest enemy that Israel wound up having was missing the mark and the opportunity for relationship with God. Though they were called God's people, they did not call him their God. Now that's in 1 Samuel 12. The people, the elders, the leaders of Israel came to Samuel, and this is in 1 Samuel 12, and they said, we want a man to be our king. And Samuel said, that's a bad idea. He said, no, we want a man to be our king. So listen, you, Samuel, go to your God not our God, your God. They told him, go to your God and try to keep him from getting mad at us for demanding a man be our king. Just think about this for a while. It wasn't their God. Do you see what I'm trying to say to you? We got to get to this place where he is our God. This goes back to Samuel and so on and so forth in Israel and demanded a man to be their king. That's for Samuel 10:19, by the way. Now Jesus has come from God to make a multitude at a pool, to find a multitude at a pool with the hope of being healed from the lack of relationship with God. Oops. All this is happening while the one who could bring spiritual and physical healing to a nation goes unnoticed by everyone. Are we missing it? Are we missing it now? If I'm supposed to be a life giver, what the heck am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Okay. We'll go to this next time, and we can, we'll talk more on this subject, and we'll go to that the next time. Bless you. I'll see you on the next one.